Hello, everyone. I hope that you are all doing well. Taking a break from a very sunny weekend to catch up with you and to record a quick video and sitting on my bedroom floor. So I hope that this has been a good learning activity for you guys in terms of creativity in this discussion post. As I mentioned last week, this actual case study is an experience that I had when I was studying in graduate school. As many of you know, my emphasis was on creativity, and it's my bread and butter. I loved it. I was so excited to apply it to the classroom, and I went straight in for a pretty intense, not intense, but pretty involved creative teaching strategy, and the students flipped out. This wasn't a gifted class, and I think a lot of them were high achievers because they were just not confident and they did not know what it meant to be creative, but they knew they weren't creative. So this is something that you will definitely experience. And my biggest advice for you in terms of modeling creative teaching and creative thinking, which you should be doing, is to do it every day. So if you randomly do these creative activities, your students won't understand that creativity is necessary every single day. I use a lot of creative strategies in my classes, particularly in one of my graduate classes. I teach a graduate research class. We do activities like they have to draw comics about certain types of research. And at first they look at me like I'm crazy, but then they realize in order to really think creatively about something, we have to understand it. So if you think about Bloom's taxonomy, create is, depending upon which version you look at, is typically considered to be that top tier of thinking. So a couple of comments from your post, and I'll introduce what we're doing for next week. So in terms of Jasmine's situation, a lot of you guys started with one of two things, which I think are both great. Some of you said, first, she needs to create this safe environment for creativity. And others said, well, first she needs to tell them what creativity is. Really, those two things go hand in hand, because if we give a clear definition to our students, then we are also promoting that safe place. I really liked that Blair mentioned having the students investigate what creativity meant. I think that's a great way to put the responsibility on the students, and they'll believe it more if they discover creativity is different than their assumptions. As Diana mentioned, creativity also seems kind of frivolous for several students, especially as they get older. When we do creative activities, they don't think it's necessary. So I've seen in the high school setting randomly a creative thinking lesson, and they do things like passing around an item and saying what that item could represent, and it's kind of weird, lasts for about 15 minutes, and then they work on their vocab for a science class. No connection at all. So I don't blame the kids. Of course, they will see it as frivolous if they don't understand that creativity is connected to their content area. So I think a great place to start is creating that safe place. Several of you mentioned that. I would have liked to see you dig a little bit deeper into what that actually means. I've told this story to, I think, a different class, but one of my colleagues that led me through my doctoral studies is pretty well known in the research world of creativity. And one day she had, it wasn't the CEO, but someone very high up in Delta called her and said, we want to help promote creativity in our pilots. Will you help us? And she literally laughed at them and said, I don't really want my pilot to be creative in the way he lands the plane. Like, I want it to land safely. And I tell that story because it brings up the concept of discretion. Discretion is very important in terms of creativity because sometimes there is a wrong answer. So to simply tell students there's never, and clearly there's a race going by my house right now, so I apologize for the noise. to tell students, oh, there's never a wrong answer, is actually not very helpful, because there are times in school and in life when there is a wrong answer. Okay, standardized testing. There's a right, there's a wrong. So we teach students what we call discretion, and that helps them understand when it is more appropriate to think creatively and when it is less appropriate. So for example, when we're looking at writing assignments, definitely an opportunity. Even in math, definitely an opportunity. Students who are able to get to the solution in different ways are demonstrating creative thinking. It does not, I repeat, does not have to be art. Creativity is all about the process, and it can lead you at times to a creative product. But I do think creating that safe place starts with talking about discretion, and that needs to be modeled. So if you're doing a practice SAT test, you can talk about discretion. All right, now is the time to really think more convergently what is the right answer. If you are doing a science experiment, that's some time for divergent thinking. You may have a set list of lab steps, but you can be creative and think of other ways to come to the solution. So it's really important to model in opportunities when it feels very like step by step by step. Encourage the students to think of new ways. And then in settings where they do need to be very careful in terms of like a standardized test, encourage them that those times are more appropriate for convergent thinking. In terms of creating this safe environment, discretion, also being aware of what we call squelchers. Squelchers is literally the research term for when we kind of stamp down kids' creativity and we say that will never work or that's too crazy. We often squelch creativity when students are doodling. You may not like to hear this, but there's actually research that students learn better when they are doodling. I'm the first to say, my first inclination is typically like, oh my gosh, listen to me, but I have to remind myself. So little things that we are saying in terms of squelching their creativity. Also providing flexibility and modeling. So Bailey did a good job discussing the ability to model creativity and then give students the chance to use it. Several of you guys mentioned providing scaffolding. I think that's definitely necessary here. It is important to teach students the creative process, so give them ideas to get from divergent and convergent thinking, help them with different brainstorming activities. Scamper is one of those. There's another, I can't remember the term, that helps students think from different perspectives. There's a myriad of different types of strategies that can be applied to any problem. But the big thing is to implement these strategies every single day. Oftentimes, I don't even call them creative strategies. Eventually I will, but a lot of students, when they hear creativity, they just freak. So you want to be careful of that and create a space where it is okay to ask questions. Actually encourage that. So I've had students do, I think he called it like the stump me wall, and he had students post up pictures or post questions that they thought would stump the teacher. I loved it. Like, that's such a great way to encourage them to think really divergently and really abstractly. So in terms of creativity, number one, yes, create that space. Creating that space does involve defining creativity. We wouldn't want to give just one definition, but definitely having the students, like Blair mentioned, jump into that defining process would be really powerful. Other ways to encourage creativity: connect it to your content, show illustrations of individuals in your content area who have successfully used creativity. That is so important. And also, every day, do it every day. You have got to resist the temptation to think it's a waste of time. In terms of being interested in further research on creativity, you do have your independent project coming up. And a really good one could be the incubation model of teaching, or the Torrance incubation model. that model of teaching actually teaches any content through the creative thinking process. So if you'd like more information on that, I'd be happy to share it. So a couple of reminders for next week. There are some very minute differences in terms of dates. So I just want to make sure this is very clear. Again, think forward to our last 2 weeks. You want to be thinking of a topic for your independent project. You can go ahead and skip into that learning module and look at what is required for that project. I would encourage you to do so. In terms of this week, your assignment is to research a creative teaching activity or strategy that you could potentially use in your classroom. After you identify the strategy, I want you to create a how-to guide that we can share among the students in terms of how you can apply this strategy to the classroom. So you will become the expert on your strategy, and then your task will be to create that how-to guide to share with your other classmates. In terms of dates, you need to choose your topic by Wednesday, April 10th at 11:59, okay? So that's different. I want you to choose a topic by Wednesday night because only 2 people can choose the same topic. I don't want 10 of you guys talking about Scamper. So there are several out there. There are several opportunities. I need you to simply post your topic by Wednesday, April 10th, and that way we will know what everybody's plan is. Then by Friday, again, this is different, Friday, April 12th, your how-to guide is due, and I will have you post that on the discussion board that I have already created. Then by Sunday, you have 2 responses to these how-to guides. So this is the same setup as if we were doing a case study. And the reason for that is I want you to look at each other's examples. Okay, so Wednesday, you've got your topic and you've posted it on the board. Friday, you have posted your how-to guide. And Sunday, you have responded to at least 2 of your classmates. You can look at the rubric to see exactly what is required, but as always, I like to recap that for you guys. 4 main things that I'm looking for. The first is a description of this tool or strategy. Tell us what it is and describe how it works. So 1, description. 2, how can you apply it in your classroom? So in this case, I'm looking for a specific example within the classroom setting that you're most familiar with. If you have not taught yet, that's totally fine. Think about a class that you could be teaching at some point and how you may use this strategy. Third, think of some potential adaptations for the strategy, specifically different age groups or different content areas, as well as some potential resources. And last, I want you to connect this strategy to our creativity research. You do not have to cite your sources in this, but I do want to see evidence that you know your information, you're connecting to our terminology like fluency and originality and flexibility, or convergent thinking and divergent thinking. So it does need to be clear that you've done some thinking in terms of connection to the research. So all of that is on Blackboard, but once again, I'm looking for your description of the strategy, the example of how you could apply it in your classroom, adaptations and further resources, and a connection to creativity research. So this is always a fun one to look at because I learn a lot from some strategies that you guys use, and I would encourage you to maybe choose something you're not familiar with. Again, make sure you post those topics by Wednesday, and that way I will know what direction we're going in. As always, I'm here to answer any questions and chat about anything related to gifted ed. I've enjoyed meeting several of you in person and hope to continue to do so. Thanks.